Mute button lightly once. See.
A quick audio check for those online.
Yes, we can hear you. This is Bruce.
Hey, Bruce. Okay. I'm not hearing anything from the meeting room yet, but...
Not yet. We'll get started shortly.
Okay. Just want to check audio here. Thanks.
Yep.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Yeah, it's turning out to be,
So I think we'll go ahead and get started.
okay, sugar, I can.
Oh, wow.
I'm glad you could show up. Yeah, I see one in the phone. Go get the,
Hello, Rob. Welcome. Come on. And you have a thing to put it on. That's good. We might need some more table space. Maybe we could put another table.
Go ahead and do that. I got something to talk to you.
So we got 1, 2, 3, 4 projects up there.
You want me to set up right here?
Oh, yeah, you can put it right here.
Yeah, watch out for this stuff. Oh, you lost the chair.
No, we can move the chair back. We can move this a little bit this way. We can move this over here. Okay.
So on this set, we have 5 projects instead of 4.
Okay, and then we'll just put this on top of this, and then we're good. Yay.
It does make it hard to walk out around.
No, yeah, we'll just walk this way.
Well, that's not too good to walk.
I know, it's better than tripping.
I think I just stay behind here.
Okay.
Okay, so
But did you get
the?
did you get it?
No, not yet. The problem is I have a couple of these.
I was going to take your Houston Chronicle article. If you could borrow that. Yeah, I had one earlier, but it disappeared.
There's the chemo one right there.
Yeah. So
Maybe we just have to get started.
I think so.
All right.
And then
we'll come back to this because the problem I have is I have a couple of AT&T addresses and it often takes them many minutes. It's just horribly slow. So and it's hung up.
Hello. How's it going? Good.
Congratulations, Ethan. I have a prize to give to you.
Oh,
And I
awesome.
would like to award it maybe at the first.
No, okay.
Allowed, and I have Saeed here,
Okay.
my photographer.
Oh, nice to meet you, Saeed. Okay.
Take a photo.
Does that matter? Congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much.
And yeah, you're in the back room of the Johnson Space Center.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should go ahead and get started, and then we could catch up afterwards. That's okay with you?
Sure. In the place of JR. JR's not doing well.
I understand.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you.
If somebody listening to it will be able to tell if that's working. Let's see.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Okay,
going back and forth.
Okay.
And hey, Keith, can you keep an eye on the online? Make sure we let everybody in.
Yeah, I've let a variety in already.
Sure.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much for coming today. This is our March North Houston Space Society, so hopefully everybody can find a chair.
Yeah, what did they do with all our chairs?
Yeah, don't we get more chairs?
Well, we got a few more chairs out. They're not all occupied, though. The front row, that's usually the case. That's okay. Yeah, you want to we can sit one right there.
Sorry.
So today we have a pretty packed agenda. So just a couple of opening remarks, and then we'll have Greg bring us up to speed on the latest space news. And then the focus of the day is going to be the Science and Engineering Fair of Houston. I was going to have the people that were at the Science and Engineering Fair of Houston from our organization talk a little bit about it and their experience, and then have each of the people that we gave prizes to talk about their project. And then we have a kind of a bonus project to also talk about. And then we're going to try to wrap it up at 4, but realistically it's probably closer to 4:30. And then we have an informal get-together at PJ's that you're all welcome to come to afterwards. Just a little news I wanted to share with you is I actually did make the front page of the Houston Chronicle.
Who's that?
Yeah. And oh, which picture is that? Anyway, so I was kind of excited about that. I thought I'd talk about why I made it. It says 1,840-day mission fulfilled. Back in 2019, NASA announced they would have astronauts on the moon by the end of 2024. The associate administrator, who was the head of the Human Explorations and Operations Directorate, Doug Lavero, had a lapel pin that he was counting down the days to the end of 2024 in order to make sure everybody stayed focused on meeting that date. And he was going around NASA highlighting a NASA person of the day. So I got this idea of interviewing a person a day, and I did that for 1,840 days. Sadly, my mission was fulfilled. NASA's still in the process of getting to the moon, so y'all did not miss the article. We had not landed on the moon yet, at least not in this century, but we should in a couple of years. We have landed on the moon, but that's the last century. Okay, so nobody's gonna trip me up on that one. So to get started, Greg, let's go ahead and go over space news.
All right. Okay. Monthly space news obviously covers about a month. We're going to talk a lot about 3 moon missions that are going on right now. Well, actually, one of them just finished up, so there's only 2 left. But there's 3 moon missions here. One from Blue Ghost, which is an amazing success. It's from Firefly is the name of the company. Intuitive Machines, they're a notable failure. And the third one is a Japanese one, which launched a while ago, and it hasn't landed yet. It's still en route. So we'll talk about each one of these in turn. So first, the good news, the Blue Ghost, which is by Firefly, which is it's a Texas company. They landed on March 2nd. Now this, along with some of the others, are funded in large part by NASA through their Commercial Lunar Payload Services program. Basically, they sell basically the companies sell a service of essentially trucking stuff anywhere, in this case, to the moon. Now, we talked about this before, actually just last month, in fact, so I won't talk about a lot of the details that I've covered before. But one thing to say about this is it was the first 100% successful commercial soft landing. It didn't tip over in particular. That's been a problem for some of the others, yeah. And it did land within about 100 meters, 330 feet of the target zone. Just to give you a feeling on the size, it's about 1,000 pounds, has 10 NASA payloads in it. It's under 7 feet tall and under 12 feet wide. Okay, some pictures to show you what this thing looked like. Now that's mounted on a Falcon 9 rocket. There were other loads that were going into that thing. That's called the fairing, the container around the back. There were at least three other loads with this one. There was another lunar lander, the Japanese one, and also a couple of satellites. And we'll talk about those because those all happened to fail as well. Apparently, either that or they were just putting it up there to test it out. You know, I'm not sure what the exact status was at that point, but at least you get an idea how it compares to the size of the rocket. Okay, so we'll have some pictures of the spacecraft on the way to the moon. So this is actually after they've gotten into their first lunar orbit. They start out and they go from Earth and they went out to the moon, but they are in a very, very elliptical orbit and they're not that close to the moon. They go through several corrections until they finally get down to a very low orbit. This is the relatively high orbit. What you're looking at here, actually you're looking at up from the bottom of the spacecraft to the top. That's a radiation sensing instrument, which I think actually was taking recordings all along the way. Now this is when they got down within 60 miles or so. This is their final orbit before they actually decided to land. So they did multiple orbits around the moon, you know, before they finally landed. And this is after the landing. So what you're looking at there is the shadow, and you know, you can kind of see the landing feet. The big thing in the center of the shadow is the nozzle for the big thruster that they had. And that's apparently a crater in front of it there. You're looking at it, no, this is, keep in mind, this is basically sunrise on the moon. They all try to land early in the morning because they're only going to get one lunar day because they don't have any kind of heat source that could take them through the night. So all these landers just typically last one lunar day, which is 14 Earth days. So, you know, that got quite a bit of time. But anyway, so that's what it looked like looking with the sun behind them. And then looking the other way, they got this great shot of the lunar sunrise. Now, they didn't watch the sun come up. It was already sunrise when they landed. But that's what it looked like. Now, they had quite a few missions. And I put green check marks by the one. These are payloads that were, I think almost all these were paid for by NASA. And green check marks on the one that are either completed or at least very, very close to being completed. And as you can see, at least 8 out of, this was as of 2 days ago, at least 8 out of the 10 were essentially considered complete. And there's a few others that it's not clear what the status is yet. I'll talk about just a few of these, so they're kind of interesting. The one down here, the 9th one on this, which is the bottom near the right, the GNSS receiver, that's global navigation systems. That's a generalization of GPS for global positioning system and the Galileo system that the Europeans run. They found that on the moon, they can access that. So this is actually, yeah, that was fairly interesting. They did the same thing in space. On the way there, they tried it, and they also found that even farther away than the moon, they still could navigate with that. So they can actually listen to the existing GPS satellites. You would really think these satellites would have very directional antennas pointing downwards toward Earth, but apparently enough signal leaks through that they can make it. So they actually, even at 243,000 miles in space, they were able to still receive those signals. So there are some possibilities for navigation there. Now that won't help on the far side of the moon, obviously, but at least on this side, it's pretty good. So they did manage to access that. Some of these other ones, it's hardly worth going through all of them. I will talk about one that's kind of fun, and that's Planet Vac. There's a vacuum. What's it for? They want to vacuum up the moon. Well, actually, not all of it. All they want to do is get samples. And they think about that. You'd like to have a vacuum cleaner, basically, because there's a lot of lunar dust. You'd like to see what's in it. But a vacuum cleaner isn't going to work on the moon because you're already in a vacuum. You can't suck anything beyond that. So what they're doing instead is they're shooting, basically they have high pressure nitrogen stored, and they shoot it out. And what they do on these bottom ones here, the ones closest to the end of it, they stir up the dust, and it makes little tornadoes. They must go in at somewhat of an angle. Then you have a separate one up there, which then shoots with the nitrogen basically helps carry in the dust. So they actually did that. That's the, this is the same thing. What they did was they have an arm that just kind of falls down, and that was this arm right here. And you can see it from, yeah, okay. This is basically the vacuum thing down here, and I guess some of that sample kind of blew up there. That just gives you an idea of what some of these things are. But they had a lot of interesting experiments. An awful lot of these are really oriented toward making it possible for humans to spend more time on the moon. I mean, for instance, the electrostatic dust shield, that really appealed to Doug last time. Dust is a major problem on the moon because it's so jagged. There's no erosion, there's no wind, you know, so it's just like little tiny shards of glass. And that's a problem. So how do you stop all that dust from getting in machinery and ruining it or getting into your lungs if you carry it back into your habitation module? Well, it turns out you can use electrostatics, you know, static electricity. And they actually tested that they can repel the dust, and if they want to, they can use it to pick up dust. You know, they actually tried both ways, and it all seemed to work out. Let's see. Well, I'm not going to go through all these things. We don't really have time for all that. But fundamentally, all these things are working. Even the this X-ray imager, where they're trying to get a feeling for you know, distant effects of magnetics on Earth. They started that actually up in space, but they didn't report any results yet. So I think we'll skip over that. But the main thing is NASA had a lot of missions and payloads, and pretty much they're getting them all done. And that's really a first. I mean, you know, most of the times in the past when we've launched one of these things, they tipped over and they could run some of the experiments to some extent, but not completely. Okay, so we'll get through that. Now, the second one is Intuitive Machines, a Houston company. They had the Nova C lander, and this is mission 2 for them. Their first mission was one of the ones that they tipped over partially. And so they were able to get some of their experiments done, but it was obviously less than satisfying. So they took partial credit. You know, they got part of a landing for it. Now, this one is a little different. They're going very close to the South Pole of the moon, about 5 degrees north of it. That was the southernmost lunar landing. That's a tough area for a couple of reasons. One is it's kind of rough terrain, but the other thing is that the shadows are very, very steep there. It's kind of tough at the pole because you really have trouble figuring out, well, where are the edges of craters and that sort of thing. And that may have been part of their problem. We don't know that. Now, they did try for a very high plateau. It's about 20,000 feet up, called Mons Mouton, which actually is named after a mathematician. You might think it was named after sheep, but no. If you know Latin or French, you'd recognize that. But no, it's actually named after a mathematician. Anyway, there's a high plateau, so that's relatively flat, and they thought they had a pretty good shot at landing there. And we talked about the plans on this one before as well as the previous failure. So this was, but just to briefly recap, it was funded by NASA, total of about $120 million for the delivery service and the payloads that were contained in it. Again, it's CLIPS, and also some funding from a separate NASA program called the Tipping Point Technology. That was specifically to put a cellular phone network in place for transmitting data back and forth between this lander and actually a couple of rovers that were going to be out there. And this is tall. This is one that's tall. It's 13 feet tall. It has a payload of about 300 pounds. Now, the big single purpose of this that really NASA paid most of the money for was this drill. They were going to drill down 3 feet, 1 meter, and look for water, you know, basically evidence of water. And what they do is they drill down any volatiles that were in there, anything that got vaporized, basically. They'd pick up with a mass spectrometer to analyze it, to recognize, in particular, looking for any hydrogen-bonded kind of stuff. And that was the bulk of the NASA payments that really were for this particular payload. Now, the day they landed, March 6th, they had a press conference basically to say, well, we're kind of in trouble, guys. They're saying they did land, and the solar cells apparently were charging somewhat, but at reduced rates. And the lander was receiving commands and transmitting, and they could even talk to individual payloads. So a lot of things were sort of okay, but nowhere close because everything was at a reduced rate. Now, if you've watched any of the previous missions like this, as soon as they say your solar cells aren't providing much power and you're transmitting at reduced rate, you think tipped over device, and well, which turned out to be true. Because you have reduced rates, well, one, because you don't have as much power, and the other thing is that probably some of your antennas are not pointing the right direction, or they might be broken off or hidden on the bottom of the thing, So it was pretty good. At least they managed to get some data. So they prioritized getting pictures back, and they finally did get one. All they could tell as of the time of this press conference was that it looked like it was tipped. The angle was kind of uncertain. So they shut down all of the really non-essential loads, which is almost everything, and they're waiting. But then the very next day, the 7th, they've had this picture, and this kind of said it all. What you're looking at here is the thing toppled over into a crater, pure and simple. You can see the legs, the landing legs are kind of sticking up in the air. It turns out in the middle, in between these two legs, in here is actually that drill, which is going to drill down a meter. So it's pointing out it can't even reach the ground. But that pretty much said they're in big trouble. You know, there aren't really a lot of solar cells up here, so they just pretty much realized they had to run on battery. That's about the best they can do. Yeah.
What the part that's closest to us?
You're talking about this?
A little bit that looks like a accordion.
This, I think it's a box. It might actually be what was carrying the rover. I had seen some pictures that the rover is going to be lowered, and what they did is they had sort of a box. The pictures I had seen were just artist conceptions, and it didn't necessarily look exactly like that, but it was sort of a cage where you can see the gaps in here. And I suspect that's probably what that was. So that was probably the rover. You know, a lot of people thought, well, maybe something, you know, can be done here. Maybe the rover can escape. Maybe they had a hopper, which is propelled by rockets. You think maybe that could have too, but apparently it wasn't accessible here. So what they found out, though, from the data they did get, is they did land within 800 feet of the target, and they were trapped inside of a crater. But it turned out there's just not enough sun, you know, to power operations. So they knew they had a very limited life ahead of them. And the problem is not only that there's not enough sun, but also when you're down inside of a crater, those craters are really cold. They're actually even colder than, you know, the surface, because they never see the sun, or at least they don't see it very long, depending on how deep the crater was. So they said for that, well, when you have a lot of thermal stresses, because you have huge temperature differences, but also you need more power to heat the thing. And so, if anything, you're going to run your power down even faster. And also, one of their two radio antennas was not in the correct orientation. So you put all those things together, and yeah, that's why they didn't get good data rates on their data transmission, and that's why they weren't getting much power. So they realized they're just going to run it till the battery is exhausted, and that's pretty much it. Now, one thing, in the previous day on the press conference, they had mentioned that the altimeter, which was a laser-based rangefinder, was noisy, and that was unusual. They hadn't expected that, because most other landers haven't seen that before. Maybe that contributed to the problem, maybe not. Yeah, we don't really know, but that was already, they were suspecting there could be a problem with that. I have to say, a lot of people have commented, including me in the past, that when you have these really tall landers, it just seems like you're asking for trouble. You land on too much of a slant, or you know, you hit a boulder or something. You know, it just seems like you're going to tip over more easily. Why do they keep doing that? Well, so a lot of people have pointed to that as an example, but it seems to me that if they landed in a crater, the real problem was they didn't do a very good job of figuring out where the craters were, because they have a target area, you know, and they picked out like a 250 meters or so, you know, circle, something like that. And the idea is you want to land within that, but the final decision on where to actually land is made autonomously by any of these landers. It has to be, because these are all small little craters, and it could be boulders that are only a couple feet or even a foot big. That's enough to really screw these things up. So they have to make that final decision. Now, who knows what happened there? If they thought they were higher off the ground, maybe they thought they had more room to go. You know, you can't tell. But I'm hoping they get enough data out of this that they can at least figure out why they had the landing problem. The previous time when they tipped over, they kind of had two problems. One was their altimeter wasn't working at all, and as a result, they misjudged how high up they were, and they landed really too fast just because they misjudged things. And they landed on an angle, and then the leg broke, you know, and then the whole thing toppled over. Now this time, it's actually worse because they fell into a crater. So I'm thinking they had trouble just figuring out where they were.
We consider pretty landing lights. You know, but if they can't get these altimeters, maybe they should just switch over to parking.
Well, and actually, most of the other landers do use some optical, you know, positioning. In fact, I think after the last experience, I think they did as well. The problem is at the South Pole, when you're very near sunrise, it's very, very hard to make things out. And so they were saying this is a tougher landing place, even than normally you would expect. So we'll see. We'll have to find out what happens. Now, they did claim that they accelerated some payload milestones, meaning they sat there and they said, okay, what can we do to make sure we get the maximum payment out of NASA for whatever we did? And so what they did was they claimed that they did something with the drill. Now, the drill is pointing up in the air, but it is movable. It was not necessarily fixed in position. Maybe it could move 30, 40 degrees. I don't know. And apparently, at least they showed that it could move around. So they did some experiments like that. They had communicated with most of the payloads. So actually, even that is useful information because it meant that all those payloads survived. So for instance, the rover, they couldn't run it, but at least they were communicating with it, indicating it had survived the journey, it had survived the landing. So, all that gives them information, but obviously they still failed when you get down to it. So just to run quickly through this, it's a shame, really. They had a lot of interesting technology in here. They had a great rover. It would have been a good thing to have done. This, like the Japanese one we talked about last time, they're going to sell some regolith to NASA, meaning lunar dust. They're going to sell that to establish the principle that you can extract resources and then sell the resources. And this was the second lander that was going to be doing this. Obviously, that's not going to happen. They had the rover on top of the rover. Yeah.
So a question about these. Since their payloads were completely undeployable and everything, do you know what the financial repercussions of that are?
I don't know how they figure out how much to pay the payload people. Like this Lunar Outpost is a Colorado company. They actually, their whole mission was paid for actually by Nokia because they were the ones that were going to drive out a mile away, from the lander to show that you can have a cellular network and communicate, and it'll all work just fine on the moon. So that was paid by Nokia. Nokia in turn was paid by NASA, and they did everything. I mean, they probably should get fully paid for this. So it's kind of hard to say. I don't know the answer. I actually did some digging yesterday, and I couldn't find much of anything on that level of detail. We talked about this one. There's a rover on top of the rover called a microant. It was really done out of MIT. You can see it kind of circled there in that little white circle. It was just going to run around and measure temperatures. But the point of that was it is a prototype for swarms of robots in the future that, for instance, might go and do inspections, on a spacecraft, not necessarily just in landing. But this is kind of the extreme test. Can you even do this on the moon? They had other hoppers. They had a hopper that could carry a couple of pounds, 1.5 miles, or you could carry less and go farther. I had trouble figuring out what it actually looked like because the last time we talked about this, it looked like the hopper kind of in the middle picture there. And then the most recent ones look more like the ones on the right. They don't look much at all alike. But the main thing they have in common is they all have thrusters and they can hop around. And the intention was to do 5 or 10, I guess 5 hops were planned. The idea is you go down into those craters that you have trouble you can't just drive into a lot of them. They might be too steep, but you could fly down into it.
Each landing from the hop, you have potential for tipping over again.
Absolutely, and especially you look at that one on the right and you think, my gosh, how's that ever going to work? So I don't know. Now the good thing is, maybe the gravity is lower on the moon, so the amount of force exerted when you're tipped is not going to be as much as it would be on Earth or on, say, Jupiter or something. If you were going for more gravity, or even Mars for that matter. They also had a small Japanese rover that weighed about a pound. That's that thing on the left there. I don't actually know what that was going to do, other than work as a test platform for the Nokia cellular communications. Other payloads, well, that's pretty. They had a monitor for radiation, and Lone Star Data Holdings, which is a Texas company that wants to have people do data backups on the moon. They had a small server to go up and demonstrate that. Okay, the third one is the one that's still on the way, and that's the one from iSpace, which is a Japanese company. And as I pointed out last time, that's not to be confused with the company called iSpace out of China, which has a dash in between the I and space. So these guys actually were first, so they weren't copying. Their rover is called Hokuto R. This is their second mission. Their first mission also tipped over. Same kind of problems, and we've talked about these before. But what I want to talk about is where they are. Now, we had a similar map last time. This is just a little fancier looking one where their path to get there was very, very long and low energy. It's very energy efficient, but it takes a long time to get there. That's why they launched the same time as one of the other landers, but they're still only halfway there. Where they are now is they're out at this point, the far point shown on this kind of a purple energy transfer map. I'm sorry, orbit map. What they're showing here is that they circle the Earth a couple of times. I don't think they were actually applying thrust because they're not showing the orbits growing here. I think all they were doing is taking time to test out all their systems. Finally, they decided to make the shoot for the moon. So they go out and they go way, way out. What they were doing in particular is they're doing a flyby by the moon to actually pick up, take advantage of the moon's gravity to help pull it along. I think that was working that way because the moon, by traveling around the Earth, it's going faster. So ultimately, this thing had to get a little bit of an extra boost. And that is the reason, I think, why they're such a low energy orbit. They're taking advantage of a lunar flyby here. Anyway, they're out, they're going way, way past the orbit of the moon, and they're on their way back now. So they're coming in. And when it gets in closer, this is, it'll look like that as they're circling the moon. Okay, one thing that's interesting about them, this is just from their webpage, about their About Us page. They're saying they want to live in a world where the Earth and the moon are one ecosystem. Now that seems like a stretch because there's not a whole lot of biology going on the moon, but I think their point is that ultimately, at least there ought to be an economy, that gets developed here, eventually involving humans, and humans and machines are going to be involved, and we need to start thinking of the system in a little bit bigger way as one big unit. Ecology, okay, not so much. But anyway, I thought it was interesting that that's their viewpoint here. Okay, now there was a Falcon 9 rocket that sent up 2 of those landers that we just talked about. They also had a couple of ride shares, meaning additional loads that were just kind of went along for the ride. This one is a 200-pound, 265-pound spacecraft. They were heading out actually to survey an asteroid. And what they want to do is ultimately mine that asteroid. And they lost it. They lost the communications, essentially. And it looked like they really had a lot of problems in the beginning. They didn't really do a very good job on coordinating with the ground stations. They hadn't tested them out fully. They even had interference from a cell phone antenna. All kinds of things happened. I think they lost their ability to communicate with this device early on, and that made it that much harder to recover. The problem they have now is that the thing has been out there. It's 270,000 miles away, and they don't know exactly where it is. And it takes a very directional antenna to do a good job of communicating like that. And they're figuring it's probably doomed. They'll look a little bit further, but it's probably pretty much over. And there's another one that also went up in that same rocket, and it's also in trouble. And this is actually directly a NASA satellite built by Lockheed Martin called Lunar Trailblazer. What it was going to do was circle the moon and look for water and minerals and landing sites, all those things. So that cost them about $100 million, which is relatively cheap, for a NASA-built satellite. But somehow along the way, they lost communications also, and they know their power is low, things probably spinning. Once it starts spinning, you have trouble because you lose communication. You have a hard time getting data or even transmitting commands to have it do anything. It's probably doomed. Now, they're going to keep trying. At least this thing is still going to be in orbit somewhere between the Earth and the moon, probably orbiting the moon. So they're still hoping that maybe they can, salvage something out of this. They're going to keep trying, but the odds do not look good right now. Okay, Starship, totally separate topic here. The results came back from Flight Test 7, which is the previous one that blew up on the second stage, blew up and generated this this kind of nice, beautiful display in the sky. Everybody liked the way it looked. Not everybody was happy that all those pieces fell down.
The one over the Turks.
Yep. Well, they essentially blew up in the same place on the next test. So they didn't manage to fix all their problems apparently. So they did come to the conclusion that it was vibrations. Now they say harmonics, and the reason to think of that is almost anything has natural frequencies where it can vibrate easily. You think of a guitar string or piano string, when it's free, if you pluck it a little bit, it tends to vibrate at a certain frequency, and also twice that frequency and 4 times and that sort of thing, the harmonics there. Even freestanding structures have these kind of vibrations, and they think that pretty much with all the noise and vibration that comes from the engines, apparently it really caused something to resonate very, very violently. That caused propellant lines to leak, and that led to ultimately ignition and fire, because it was all inside the vessel, So there was oxygen and, methane present there. Finally, the flight termination system, the safety system blew it up, which it should have at that point, and it did. Now, they did a lot of fixes.
It's worth pointing out that rocket engines are kind of like car engines, the fact that car engine does not really move, does not really explode fuels smoothly. It's a series of, if you've got a V8 engine, you've got 8 explosions that go off in sequence. It's just very, very fast. It's so fast that a human being can't perceive it normally. With rocket engines, the same thing is, particularly if you have 33 of them, and they run a lot faster, but it's not one clean, smooth explosion going on in the engine. It's really more a series of multiple explosions that are happening staggered apart in time and space, and we don't perceive it because our senses aren't fast enough, but that's what's happening. And so that shakiness makes rockets really shaky.
Yeah. So flight test 8, this was supposed to have fixed that. They tried all the fixes on it. Essentially the same thing happened all over again. Flight test 8 was basically a rerun of test 7, trying to redo all the things that didn't, succeed on flight test 7. In particular, they wanted to test deploying satellites. I mean, that's a very high priority for them because they want to start getting the bigger Starlink satellites out there with their own rocket. They had new heat tiles and pin positioning, which hadn't really been tried yet. They had reentry experiments. They wanted to make sure that if they start to put little arms sticking out the side so that they can catch them with the mechanical chopsticks, will they be able to do that without them melting off in the process? They don't know any of that yet. And it blew up again. So the booster returned to the launch site just like the previous 2, well, tests 5 and 7 anyway. They had a little bit of problems. The 2 of the engines didn't restart. When the second stage separates from the first, they have to turn around the booster, and head back. And at that point, all their engines are supposed to light up except for the very outer ring. And a couple of them didn't actually. One of them did restart when they coast for a long time, basically burning off energy, getting hot, and then finally, toward the end, they have to turn the engines back on. And actually, one of those 2 came back. But they're still having some engines aren't quite relighting the way they should. So nonetheless, that didn't stop them. They've got enough power in those engines that they can get by without it. So they caught the thing. But anyway, they lost control on the second stage. Pretty much a repeat of what happened before. The engines failed. I saw that on the displays. They lost control, and you could see the thing was starting to spin. They lost telemetry, and then there was an explosion. Presumably the flight termination system, we don't actually know that yet. So we'll find that out later.
Over Miami. Were you in Miami?
Well, no, actually it was out pretty much in the same place as the last one because they were already that far downrange. It was just visible. People actually saw that from Florida this time. I'm not sure why they saw it this time and not the last time. But
Saw that out of the airport.
they went, oh yeah. Well, that happened last time too. So. Yeah. Anyway, so it's it's a shame, but they will go on. These tests don't actually cost them that much money, and this time at least it did disrupt aviation for a short period of time, but it was nowhere near as bad as before. And I don't think any debris hit anything this time. Everything fell within the original zone. When they make these plans for these flights, they have a zone that says, okay, people stay out of this zone because if anything goes wrong, stuff will fall here, and it did. And it looks like this time it all fell within the zone that it was supposed to. Okay, just to wrap this up, a couple of interesting projects that are sponsored by the Air Force Research Lab. Two different situations here. One is a company called Varda Aerospace Systems. We've talked about them before. They were the ones that first put up pharmaceutical manufacturing in a small capsule, going, they circled the Earth. And the problem was they had trouble getting approvals to land. Most of the stuff that we send up, with the exception of things coming back from the space station, nobody ever thinks about bringing things back. Well, for the future, we have to. If we're going to do any kind of, manufacturing in space, for instance, or, bringing anything back to Earth, we had to be more set up for this. And they got so disgusted, the FAA took so long, they're going to Australia to land now. So they landed their second test, they landed in Australia. This one's different than the first one. The first one was purely commercial, sponsored by pharmaceutical companies. The second one, obviously for high value manufacturing, you're not going to make aspirin, in this kind of a thing. You're going to make really expensive stuff. But the second one, they put up a larger. They're doing a lot of stuff with bioreactors, reactors that actually have biological elements in them, And so they were really just experimenting with that. But the thing was actually paid for by the Air Force, because what they want is they want more data on what happens during hypersonic reentry. You know, if you're coming back very, very high speed, like from a missile, they don't have much ways of getting data like that, other than sending out missiles, which is a very expensive thing. This is a very small thing, you know, but nonetheless, they do all these studies on the plasma, all the way from the beginning right down to the end. So this is actually a project that's going to go on for quite a while with the Air Force. They put in some spectrometers for analyzing what exactly is going on, and so that, you know, they got the benefit of that. So the Air Force ends up funding what's going to help in the future with manufacturing in space. The second one is kind of interesting, and people have talked about this one before as well. The Air Force Research Lab has a rocket cargo program, meaning point-to-point delivery of stuff, you know, from one place to another. And obviously, they're the most interested in military applications. They're thinking, you know, instead of sending giant cargo aircraft, which take a while, they want to get somewhere from in just an hour. You know, that's kind of their goal. And so back in 2022, they actually set up a contract with SpaceX to demonstrate the technology, probably in 2026 or 2027. So it looks like they're getting more serious about this now. They obviously had to wait till there was even some hope that the Starship was really going to be a real thing. And it's getting closer. They're having their problems, but it's getting closer. So now what they've done is they're out getting approvals to actually land on a remote Pacific island, Johnson Atoll. Now, Doug, I bet you know about this one, because this one has figured in U.S. military history for a long time. It's actually officially been a wildlife refuge since the 20s or 30s. But really, it's actually owned by the Air Force and is run. What they did was they did nuclear tests there. They did when they wanted to explode nuclear weapons up in the atmosphere. That's where they launched them from. They built at the end of the Vietnam War, when they had to bring back all the toxic Agent Orange defoliant. They built a plant there to dispose of that. And of course, then it took another 20 years to fix the dirt afterwards. But they finally cleared all that up. So they have a long history of all the oddball military stuff, and of course they use it as an airstrip in World War II, and that's and for Vietnam as well. Anyway, now they're going to use that as a place to test out the point-to-point delivery of stuff. So that should be interesting to see how that comes along. Okay, just a few minutes on upcoming launches that are interesting. One of them is the Crew 10 launch, that is sending up, on a Dragon capsule and on a Falcon rocket, sending up astronauts to the space station. And this was it was a little bit earlier than they originally had planned. But the point of this one is that about a week later, that thing returns, or a capsule returns, and that's going to have the so-called stranded astronauts. They were never really stranded, but we'll just call them that and let it go at that. Other things coming along, we talked about before, Project Kuiper, which is a big satellite constellation. They may finally get their first operational launch. They haven't said that it's been delayed, so they're still talking about this quarter. Axiom has a private mission going to the space station. Dream Chaser, the space plane, I know Doug is especially interested in that one. That's still on target for May, as far as we know. And the other thing is there's some Mars satellites that are supposed to go up on a next Blue Origin flight. That's pretty much it. Then we have ones that are further in the future, but we don't have to worry about them for a while. Well, maybe the Neutron rocket, which is essentially Rocket Lab's answer to the Falcon 9. That should be actually going up in July.
Reusable.
Yeah, reusable. Okay. Any other? More?
Yeah, just back up. Well, or go to the list of, go back to the list of things out of the Rocket Lab. Okay, and the ISS coupling and that.
Oh, yeah, well, remember, we actually had talked about that one in one of the earlier meetings, where what happened was the original plans were they're going to put up a habitation module and attach it to the space station, taking advantage of all the air and the power and all that stuff from the space station. But then the space station people said, wait a minute, we're trying to deorbit the space station, and we need the port actually where you were going to come up and attach. We need that for other stuff. So they switched things around, and now they're putting up the power supply module first, which doesn't actually have to really be attached when you get down to it, but they're going to attach it for a while, and then later they'll have the habitation module going up. But in 2028 they'll decouple all of that and just be freestanding, which actually would be sooner than the original plans.
Intuitive Machines gets another chance up at that.
Yeah, they still have two more to go that they're contracted for. So, yeah, this one I think actually is supposed to go to the far side. So, I mean, they're going to make it even more complicated. You know, as a result, they're going to include some relay satellites for your communications relay satellites in that mission as well. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. We can get on. We have a lot of science fair stuff to go through here. So,
did you get that presentation? I know you were waiting for it.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe that's good. And Robert, did you want to come up here and talk about running the booth and what you saw at the Science and Engineering Fair? Here's
Here, we can get this, oh, this is a microphone?
that's a microphone. Yeah.
I can't hear it anyways. Doesn't do me a lot of good, but hopefully it helps everybody else.
yeah, the top of it is where the sound actually
Right up there.
comes in.
Just 1 minute.
So,
So
I'm
the
still not
Science
getting it.
Engineering Fair is, one day of judging, but the day before they have a actual fair event, and they have multiple sponsors. And we had a booth for the North Houston Spin Society, which Robert had ran. So let him talk a little bit about that.
There's any audience questions.
Hey, Ace. Good to see you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Joan Young, the Executive Director of the Science and Engineering Fair of Houston. And we're excited to be able to see our students showcase their scientific research.
So this is what it looks like. This is what the fair looks like for those of you who haven't been to the fair. This is last year's fair. That's not this year's fair.
Chevron has been a long-time sponsor of the Science and Engineering Fair. We're so happy to be here. It's exciting, right? It's how kids are getting involved with science and engineering and various STEM topics. For Chevron to celebrate all of that learning, the educators that have worked so hard to help them get here, we are just happy to celebrate and support them alongside. It's like a privilege to be here and to get to choose my own experiment and learn more about that.
I can see there are a lot of innovative ideas. There's such great questions, such great capability.
For me to be here at a science fair, I feel like I'm fulfilling a dream. I was able to choose to work in aerospace, which is something I've always been very passionate about. As a sixth grader, it's taking me really, really far. I feel like it's a great experience for me to learn more and connect with other students.
I get to see like all the other projects. Some of them are really interesting.
The fact that they're in the science fair means that they are inquisitive. Believe in yourself. Anything that you want to become, you are able to become. You're able to achieve those careers. Many people think they're not able or don't know how to, but you are able to achieve careers in science and engineering. Do you know that you represent the Southeast region's best of the best?
The research, the knowledge, and skills that you're developing right now really matter in big ways on real challenges. Because in short, the future needs you.
You're the difference makers of today, and you are the change agents of tomorrow. I want to encourage you guys to keep being curious. Maybe one day you'll be the ones leading our town and making the world even more exciting and a better place.
So the Houston Fair is the regional fair. It's 22 counties, and I was very intrigued with the overall event. There was over 800 projects, But it seemed to me that a lot of the people that go on to the state fair from here, they do not necessarily, they go on to state fair, which I'm going to judge coming up in a month, and then they go on to the international fair. But there's a lot of really great projects being done at our fair that are space related or can lead into space exploration and what we're trying to accomplish as a species. So I suggested to the National Space Chapter that we go ahead and do a special awards group, which is what this is all about. So we go through and look at all 800 projects on an overview and look at the ones that would lean us in the direction of things that need to be improved upon or things that we need to do in order to make colonization of space, et cetera, possible. And we want those students to be aware that not only are their projects interesting, but we're interested in encouraging them to do other projects. Some projects are not as directly related as others, but they're still very interesting, and these students put in a lot of time. I'm working on a scholarship program where we can eventually, I can, through my Starfleet group, eventually give scholarships to some of these students for the University of Houston. So it'll go directly to the university for them to do scholarships. So I'm working on that. But in the short term, the last 3 years, we have given awards to anywhere from 6 to 10 students each year. This year we chose 7, and I brought in an outside person, which is 7. So we've recognized 7 different projects that we think were significant. And the whole concept is to encourage the students to do it. And hopefully in the future, students that are here this year, we'll review them if they do a project next year. It turns out that we have one student who didn't show up today because of conflict, who was recognized by us last year and this year for 2 totally different environmental projects. And so we're doing a lot of different things. In order to develop a judging committee, I can judge astronomy or physics or biology or something. But if I do that, I can't do the special thing for the National Space Society. So I asked Chris, who's one of the space ambassadors, to put together a team of judges, of which we put together 6, and we took 3 to the event. And we evaluated the projects that we are going to take a look at today and thinking that they make a major contribution towards what we're doing. And I thought I'd let Chris tell you a little bit about how he put the judging team together. Can you do that?
Well, basically, I ask people, right?
Here's your mic. You can use this.
Right. So I mean, obviously, it was about asking people to do this. Now, this is my 4th year judging at the science fair here at the University of Houston. And I think, Robert, you've been doing that for a long time too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we got a couple of people here together. Keith is around here. Yep, there's my buddy Keith. He's one of the judges, and we had another judge, and she's not here today. And what we did was, just very briefly, we took the same criteria as all the general judges did. So we looked at, okay, how creative is the topic, right? What's the scientific method? How was it presented? How was that communicated, and so on? And we went through the list and we gave points there. But the number one criteria was, is it related to space travel, right? So we only really wanted to look at that. And that was our short list.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there were so many projects out there. It was incredible. I think the spreadsheet of the projects was about 1 gigabyte worth of data. And so we did a short list. We ran through there. And yeah, I think it took us about 4 or 5 hours to get through all that very well. And I was just astonished at the kind of topics that we saw there. Made it very easy to find out these very, very interesting topics and boards and stories that we heard there. So I'd like to congratulate everybody for doing that, and it made it fun to see all that great work. Thank you. And we want to see you, obviously being the next proponents of space technology.
And so some of the projects you're going to see today, what Chris put together was different than we had done it in the past. We have a junior group and a senior group. So he rated them with the team. The judges got together and rated the team. 1st place, 2nd place, and 3rd place. in the senior group, and first place, second place, and third place in the junior group. So if you're an 8th grader, you're not competing against a 12th grader. You're basically competing with people in your own age group. So some of the projects you're going to see today are in the junior group, some of them are in the senior group, and like I said, I gave blue ribbons to the first place people, red ribbons to the second place, and a white ribbon to the third place. And I'm also this year going to give a yellow ribbon to the honorable mention person that I asked to do a presentation today. So aside from that, we should launch into the presentations. Did you have an order in which you wanted to do that, Nathan?
I do. I have it up there. I have it right up there. So, Asa? Oh, there you are. Excellent. And what I'll do is,
How'd I do?
So, hi, my name is Asa, and my project is on proving the feasibility of an aircraft. Basically, an aircraft rocket engine uses an inverted geometry of what's called bell engines or double bell engines. Basically, have a combustion chamber. It's kind of a combustion chamber, and then they narrow down to a throat where the exhaust gas is going to around Mach 1, and then because of the property of exhaust gas, and the only way to accelerate the gas past Mach 1 is you have to expand the area it's in. And gas. So then you have an expansion chamber, and the way most bell engines work is that expansion chamber is set size. So it's called design altitude, and basically what that means is that the bell engine is only efficient at one altitude. So usually at sea level, because that's when you want to peak up. But the unfortunate thing about that and setting just a single thrust altitude is that you lose performance quite significantly when you start going into a large we start going higher and higher. And that's the reason we have staging aircraft. I mean, other than dropping the mechanical weight, we have staging for rocket is that property. Basically, a bell engine uses atmospheric pressure to shape the exhaust fluid to actively adapt to the surrounding conditions of the engine. It means it maintains a high level of efficiency, irrespective of the altitude. Which sounds super great on paper, but we only use bell engines today. So why is that? Basically, the reason we only use bell engines today is that they're way lighter and they're much simpler to move. And so what that means is they're way easier to run cooling systems through. So most cooling systems there's a bunch of different ways you can cool a rocket, like film cooling or regenerative cooling. But mostly people use regenerative cooling, and basically that means you route propellants through the case of an engine before they're injected into the engine. It has a couple of benefits. It lowers the sidewall temperatures of the engine, which allows them to maintain a higher level of mechanical strength after long burns. Also, it pre-warms propellants, and most propellants work in cryogenic state. When they're pre-warmed, they burn more efficiently. So, a pre-warmed propellant and cooling the wall, super important. Also, cutting channels through the case of the engine diminishes any mass. Engines are proportionally a small amount of mass, but any weight you can take out of an engine is still an improvement. But the reason we don't use regenerative cooling system or any spikes is that because aerospikes are really complicated, they have a case and a center spike. Basically, the bell engine is hollow, but the aerospike is a center spike, which means they're really hard to machine. So if you try to use CNC or casting, especially with a closed circuit that can be used for regenerative cooling, it's really difficult to do. Casting was CNC machining. And so my project focuses on showing that
What you want to do, the awards?
3D printing for us uses high temperature resins, but in industry is much more likely to be a metal 3D printing, so usually copper alloy. So we started out with, we want to just prove that it's feasible. So our main design goals are that our engines survive multiple tests, give us scaled industry standard numbers, and are actually able to move the engine to a usable degree. So showing that
just be able to provide the performing, so you make really iterative tweaks really quickly. And also I use massive CDA, which is a huge database of combustion data points collected in the 1990s and early 2000s. And you can only get some very important values. That I was minimizing then I counted the model of both the test stand, which is kind of cool. That's also a novel design that we had to come up with because there's not really like a how to do this tutorial on how to make test stands specifically for the stuff we needed because we really prioritize safety a lot with this project. So we did something that's kind of uncommon, especially in small scale testing. We built a nitrogen purge system, which works very well. We'll have a video when I get to the testing phase of the nitrogen purge system working. And basically, we have a bunch of backups. If the nitrogen purge system's ever turned on, because there's a check valve, because it fuels propane, because there's a check valve further down the propane line, irrespective of whether the propane line's open or closed, because we use a higher pressure nitrogen line, it closes the propane line. So if you ever purge the system, even if you forget to turn off the propane, or if you're unable to turn off the propane, it's going to clear the engine completely. Also, we use a lot of flashback arresters for the oxygen in conjunction with check valves and two-way valves, just to make sure there's no potential way there could be any flame coming back up the oxygen feed system. Then that's the plumbing diagram. We also have an electronics for both data collection and control, because you don't really want to be near a rocket engine while it's firing. We use both a Raspberry Pi for data collection and an Arduino Uno for control. We found, even though we used two different boards, we found the Arduino was much more consistent, and we just wanted consistency over everything because consistency means safety, and that's what we're really focusing on. Then we finally realized it at long last, and we were able to test. So this is version 1, and with this test, we just want to make sure all of the stuff is designed with a 30+ safety factor for the engine. So we would never reach any critical points, and that factor is calculated with barrel stress. So it's like the worst case scenario, if the nozzle were plugged and it was running full tilt, it still should take 30 times what that pressure would be to burst this. And so what did break was the supports that connect the spike to the case, which is just a really easy fix for the design. So we slowly ramped up the pressure there. We saw decent performance. For version 2, we maxed out our data collection. So we're not exactly sure what our true data was from this engine, but we do know the lower bound of that data. For our total impulse, we were just under a kilonewton second, which would make us in the top 8 largest aero spikes ever created by any organization ever. So that was an exciting data point for sure. And we also saw a 36% improvement in wall temperatures, which is a huge improvement. And it shows that a regenerative cooling system is definitely feasible for an aerospike, and especially for mitigating like the breakdown of the mechanical structure. So yeah, we're just under a kilomere per second. Peak impulse is around 107 newtons, but we don't actually know. We think it's around that because that's near what our ideal peak thrust number would be. So it's very unlikely it would be much more than that, but just over 107 newtons, which is a decent amount of thrust. It's around 24 pounds of thrust. And then the cost of these engines is also one of our biggest things. With metal 3D printing, which would be an industry, but for us, resin 3D printing, there's no loss of material. Whereas casting, post-processing for casting, you lose a ton of material, or CNC milling, you lose a ton of material. With 3D printing, you lose almost no material. So for these engines, it's only $89.50 per engine, which, funnily enough, is cheaper than an off-the-shelf engine of the same impulse class. So if you were to go and buy just a regular like SD's engine, which produces the same amount of thrust as these, it's around twice as expensive. So from a cost perspective, especially because these are bipropellant engines, it's quite good. And $10 in fuel per cost. Also, the regenerative cooling diminished engine mass by 27, just under 27%, compared to if there wasn't a cooling system. And so all these numbers are great, but I can kind of frame it to you. Especially this is funny because we talked about the Falcon rocket in the earlier presentation, but if all of the cluster for the Falcon boosters was with the Raptor engines was swapped out for Aerospike engines, the performance increase, just taking the median performance increase, which is generally Aerospikes are 5 to 10% more efficient. So if you just pull 7.5% more efficient, the propellant mass, because propellant mass is the vast majority of total rocket mass, decreased by 7.5%, would increase the payload capacity by 131%, which seems absurd, but that is the number if you do it, which is crazy to think about. And for the private consumer, because they also, all of these private companies are a perfect example. For them, if SpaceX wanted to make the same amount of money off every launch, with that improvement, it decreases the private consumer's cost by 57%, which is incredible. That makes it much more accessible, especially for early stage startups, to get things into orbit, because the prohibitive cost of the aerospace industry is a huge milestone and a huge blockade to innovation. So it's a huge impact. And for future research, we have printed our version 3, which is pretty exciting. We hope to test by the end of March. We've also printed a similarly sized Bell engine. So we were the first people ever to compare an equally sized Bell engine and Aerospike engine. In real world, there's a lot of simulation, but simulation, at least currently, is only so accurate, especially with thrust numbers. You can't actually judge how much of your ideal thrust you're going to get super accurately with simulations. So we were the first people ever to compare equally sized Bell engine and Aerospike engines to either put the nail in the coffin for the Aerospike or be like, well, you maybe should consider this for industry. And then we want to publish the research. And we would love to work with a larger company because now we would love to do this in industry standard materials like metal 3D printing, but that does become prohibitively expensive, at least for us. So yeah, that's kind of the project. Oh, and then also we did a video of our test. Yeah.
We have the movie.
Yeah, yeah.
I know where it is.
You want to? I'll let you.
And so this video is the version, this test actually, this exact rocket engine. And so you'll see there's a big crack in this engine, and so it looks like a pretty horrific failure, mechanical failure. But it's not really that visible in the video. But basically, the way we test the thrust of the engine is on this. Basically, it's actually a desk drawer. It's just a guide rail. And the exhaust gas of the engine was so hot that it heated the desk rail to a point of the reflected heat off the desk rail just to crack the engine. It's not the actual heat of the combustion chamber, but it's the reflected heat. And so if you come and see the stretch, which is all cracked and destroyed, is the exact width of the rail. So we mashed it up. We're like, oh, this is the culprit. But yeah, so we changed that for our future. We don't have a linear rail anymore. This sounds pretty cool. I don't know if this sounds. Oh, it's off now. Here, just go back.
Yeah.
So that's why we're cracked. And then that's just the kind of weird noise is the check valve barely staying open. And then when we turn on the nitrogen purge system, which will happen soon, it works pretty well. And basically the nitrogen purge system, we run it at a pressure, which means it would extinguish any flames within like a 1 foot radius and basically creates like a inert atmosphere around the engine in a 1 foot radius. So, and because of our nitrogen tanks are quite large, you can run it for a really long time. So there's just no way you could have a runaway, or it's very unlikely you could have a runaway of the engine or the test stand burning. It works pretty well, as you can see.
Very good.
I don't know if you guys have any questions or if we have time for questions. But...
I mean, you tested it. It's like if somebody's driveway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We tested on private property.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, it wasn't that loud. So.
Yeah. No, luckily it wasn't that loud.
Because that's been a problem in the past. People testing rocket engines end up upsetting their neighbors, and then the police show up, and the fire department shows up. And you call the police and the fire department beforehand and just tell them what you're going to do. They're okay. They just don't want to see their switchboard light up, going, "We don't know."
Yeah.
So that's just a note.
We have reached out to the Friends of Amateur Rocketry site at Johnson Space Center. I'm a high power rocketry license certified,
Right,
so but the main problem is, especially because we're under 18 and we're doing experimental engine design, there's not any waivers ever written for the specific use case because it's so niche. So almost no one wants to accept the liability. So that's why we kind of had to do it on private property.
Yeah.
But also, the first test especially, we were like, this is going to be really loud or it's going to be fine. And now we're much more used to all procedure and stuff. But the first test was definitely nerve-wracking. We're getting much faster and more efficient.
Got a lot more experience, a lot more confidence.
Yeah.
Great.
What grade are you? And are you a grand prize winner? And are you going to Regeneron?
So I'm a junior, so I'm an 11th grader. And yeah, so we won the grand prize and we qualified for the International Science and Engineering Fair.
All right.
Yeah.
People were on your team or
so
collaborating on this.
It's me and one other, and I'm in charge of the design, and he's in charge of the electronics. I will say he's the electrician, I'm the plumber. But yeah, so that's we have 2 people.
And for both of y'all, we got a award that will be given out to you, and I think what we'll do is we'll do it afterwards. We'll give them the awards afterwards. Just to
You want to do the awards at the end of all the presentations?
At the end of all the presentations. I think that works out well. Well, thank you so much. That's fantastic. I'll just take this real quick. Awesome. Well, next we'll have Ram come up and talk about yours. I forgot, did you send me a presentation or not?
I just don't have a presentation.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah,
so let me make sure this is on. It is. Okay, excellent. You can just clip on your jacket right
yeah,
there.
I'm not sure. Where? Let's see. Hi, my name is Ram. So I'm a junior in Cypress Ranch High School, and this is a solo project that I've done. So this project is not necessarily like me building things. It's just kind of like a lot of theory that I've put, and also I've used like certain resources and also talked to a lot of scientists that I've known in the area about how exactly we can mitigate the time dilation that comes when we're moving in high-speed velocities. Exactly. High-speed velocities, which is similar to what we see in rocket ships. So if we're trying to go to like an exoplanet, right, in the near future, we need to be traveling close to the speed of light, which is a significant problem. Because once we reach the speed of light, or we're traveling close to the speed of light, the time that surrounds us eventually starts to decrease. So as we perceive time, it slows down. When we're comparing that to someone here on Earth, if we're sending signals between one person and the other, this affects communication. Like we can also take communication as an example where we see the rockets earlier, right? Where like we weren't able to send messages like correctly. So I wanted to figure out if there was a potential solution to mitigate the effects of time dilation. So the null hypothesis that I came up with was that quantum coherence-based synchronization protocols have no significant effect. And I wanted to try to disprove that because that's what we're trying to do here. And I eventually came across the solution, quantum entanglement, or if we can potentially use quantum synchronization in order to mitigate time dilation. So the first thing I wanted to take a look at is how significant is this problem? So I took an example. Suppose let's assume there's a person here on Earth and a person moving in a spaceship. How would they differently approach time? So what I did was I set the person here on Earth to 1 second, and I put it in the time dilation formula, and eventually I got to a point wherever 1 second here on Earth became 0.045 seconds for the person on spaceship. Look at that significant difference. So now, what if we just switch the board? What if the person on the spaceship is going on 1 second? How would it affect the person here on Earth? And I eventually found out through using the same equation that it would take approximately 22.36 seconds for the person here on Earth, and it only take 1 second for the person in the spaceship. So think about how big of a problem this is. So have any of y'all seen the movie Interstellar before? Yes. How many of y'all loved Interstellar? Exactly. So what was the big problem that we saw in Interstellar? Communication.
One planet.
Yeah. So if you were on Miller's planet, for example, the communication that would take, I believe it was 4 hours compared to like a couple years here on Earth, right? So how can we exactly mitigate time dilation? Well, if you're aware in quantum synchronization, the main thing that we see is if we affect the state of one particle, it would immediately affect another. So if we could place particles entangled here on Earth and here on the spaceship and affect each other simultaneously, could there potentially be a solution wherever we can send the information instantaneously? So that's what I wanted to try to solve. And I came up with an equation where I just kind of manipulated time dilation equation but added a special component to it. And I labeled this the K factor. I know nothing really special about this K factor, like the name itself, but it actually has a significant effect. It's the degree to which quantum synchronization mitigates time dilation errors. So I'm not sure if you guys can see this graph, but over here, this yellow line represents as the relative velocity increases the speed of light, this is how much synchronization error we get. So you can see that point right up there. But when I set the K factor to a small significant amount, 0.1, look at it how exactly we were able to mitigate the effects that time dilation portrayed on us. So I wanted to talk about some characteristics about this K factor. So when K equals 1, it represents the ideal scenario that we see. So there's no effects on time dilation. So we're going to need, the K needs to be significantly greater than 1 or significantly less than 1 in order for us to see an effect. So when K is less than 1, it indicates that while quantum coherence protocols are mitigating time dilation effects, we're not significantly eliminating them. We can see some mitigation happening, but that's not necessarily what we're not actively sending information at the speed of light. We're kind of just like sending it at a significantly faster rate compared to before. So whenever we set K greater than 1, which I'm not exactly sure is possible for humanity at this point in time, but when it's possible, we'll be able to send communication instantly, which is exactly what quantum synchronization does in nature. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is beyond physics. So how can we use this beyond the scope that we know in the physics field? So deep space communication, which helps improve synchronization in interplanetary networks. Like I said before, if we're trying to travel to an exoplanet, we want to be able to communicate with the people here on Earth effectively. And another impact that I saw was in financial and global networks, such as high precision quantum synchronization can optimize global financial transactions and stock trading. So like if there was a person here on New York and a person here in California, like in the stock market, the people here on New York are going to have a significant advantage of gaining data at a much faster rate than the person in California. So quantum also has an effect on a very small scale here on Earth. And finally, medical imaging and quantum sensing. So advances in quantum synchronization could improve MRI and PET scans in the future. So that would be like a rundown of my project. Any questions?
Yeah. In the real world, I was reading that 5 years ago that they had managed to entangle a couple of on something from one end of the UCLA campus to the other end. And has that distance gotten farther? Do you happen to know that?
I'm not sure. Like at the present, the distance actually hasn't gotten much farther. Like we've tried many many different attempts to make it farther. But the thing is, the farther the particles are, the more difficult it becomes. But eventually, according to the laws of, so like it becomes more difficult, but it becomes more useful at the same time. But the thing is, we need to be able to communicate at a much faster rate. So at this scale, it's going to be a spaceship way out there and a person here on Earth. So how can we potentially get there? That's something I'm trying to actively research. Because according to quantum, it should be able to work. And we've probably seen many different instances where it worked, but when practicing in reality, it's not necessarily what we can do right now.
Energy intensive?
I believe, compared to radio signaling, yes, it should be energy intensive.
Distance doesn't have any effect.
Distance doesn't have any effect, but like it's just our practicality of how much we're able to put in and be able to conduct. That's the main problem.
I thought I had read somewhere that the Chinese were doing a satellite experiment.
Oh yes, I've heard about it before, but I'm not exactly sure the details.
I don't know how it turned out.
Yeah, I'll definitely take a look and get back to you.
Or are you planning to do a second-year study, like maybe there might be some other kinds of solutions for time dilation, or
right? Yeah.
Eliminate time dilation.
Yeah, for sure. I'm also looking forward to debugging exactly what's part of this K factor, because there's certainly aspects that I can probably derive a formula for K, because there's many things I need to learn about quantum entanglement, because there's a lot of calculus in it.
You also going to Regeneron?
I'm not going to Regeneron.
Thank you so much. Hopefully we'll have some time at the end for people to come and talk to you a little bit more about your project. Thank you. And then we have Akshat, 7th grader from Ford Settlement Middle School, going to talk about his project, Intelligence via AI, Rocket Launch. And let me give you a, here we could just clip this on to your pocket. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Akshat, and I'm doing a solo project. It's about me creating an AI-based application that helps rocket engineers create a successful rocket using AI suggestions and flight data. So I started by doing lots of research on how to basically start coding it, what are the most top 10 causes of failures that I can use in my Excel database. I also created a whole plan on how I can code the application, and I don't have my laptop right now, but I created an Excel with around 74 rockets, the thrust, the weight, their purpose, and how many have been successful in the past of each type, the cause of failure as well. And based off of that data, I trained the AI bot to give suggestions to the user on how to create their rocket in an efficient and accurate way. Now this project wasn't as accurate because I used a generative AI model, and instead of that I can use I can train my bot from scratch because I used the OpenAI public model. I can also increase my data set from not only dozens to thousands of rockets, so there's more accurate data.
Do you want this projected on the screen? Do you have that?
Yeah, sure, it's fine. It's not in order though.
Go back and forth with the arrows there.
Thank you. So I started with, it asked me for my name. The application asked me for my name. It asked me what I want to do with the rocket, what's my purpose. It also asked me what my thrust and weight is, so I can take that to give me the top 5 closest rockets from the database. and that will help, and it'll give the thrust and weight of those 5 closest rockets. Then it asks me for if I have any questions, I can tell it to give me suggestions. That's where the AI part kicks in. It tells me a list of around 10 suggestions, things I can do to prevent failures. That's basically a rough sketch of what it basically does. You input the weight and thrust. It gives you back top 5 rockets that are closest to the input you gave it. And then if you ask any questions, it gives results back in a list form. This are my sources. I did lots of research on this topic to find out like closest rockets, all the data for each and every rocket. And I think that's it. Any questions? Well, I wasn't really trying to find anything in this project. I was mostly trying to create something that can help people and the public, because this isn't. I researched a lot, and there's no other model in the public. Yeah, that is anything that does any type of function related to this. So yeah. Yeah.
Where is this model now? Is it available out on the internet? It's open source. It's like on SourceForge or whatever. Where if John, your public, wants to check it out himself, can we run this?
Yeah, I have my laptop, but it's not. I haven't released it to the public yet. It's not as accurate as you might expect. But I have my laptop. I'm not sure.
In the future, it will be published out on the World Wide Web.
Yes.
And SpaceX might say, hey, let's do a study of 40,000 rocket launches, and let's find out where the real pain points are. And this model will solve that.
Yeah, hopefully.
I appreciate that you included ground operations in that analysis, because that's, yeah, I mean, it shows it's one of the biggest causes of problems. And that is one of the big things that Elon Musk realized, and that's why he calls that entry stage 0 Magathala, because that recognition of very important place. You've got it up there. You've recognized that. Very good.
7. It's my second year in SEFH.
Wow, awesome. Thank you so much. And then could you get Elizabeth's presentation now? Which one, sir? The last one I emailed you, I think. That's the one. So could you just clip this on you? I think on that. I have here. And then also there you go. The left or right.
Okay, thanks. I'm just gonna. Okay. Hi, my name is. Hello, my name is Elizabeth Kennedy Ellison, and my project is Growing Green on the Red Planet, comparing the effects of 2 synthetic nutrients in nutrient-deficient soil with and without additives. So this is my introduction. Based on studies, I've seen that many people want to go to Mars because it is a potential habitat, because right now our Earth is sadly dying due to carbon emissions and other stuff that we do. So I thought, well, if we have to go to Mars, we need a source of food and nutrition. So this project aims to determine whether plants could grow in nutrient-deficient soil in a simulated Martian environment. Of course, due to Mars's nutrient-deficient soil, regular plants couldn't just grow on this environment. So I used 3 plants in general. I used purple plum radishes, pitaya, and I used purple basil, which is all purple because it's my favorite color, and I wanted to add a bit of meat to it. So purple plum radishes grow in nutrient deficient soil, and they also like colder environments, which is good because Mars is very cold, and radishes were my top one that I thought would grow. And also, we had basils, which don't grow in cold environments, but they do thrive in nutrient-deficient soil, which is Martian soil. And so that was my number 2. And then pitaya, which doesn't grow it grows in regular soil, but not nutrient-deficient soil, and it is not prone to colder environments. So those are all mine. And then here are my questions. So my questions were, will purple plum basil grow in nutrient-deficient soil in a simulated Martian environment? Will pitaya grow in nutrient-deficient soil in a simulated Martian environment? And will basil purple ruffles grow in a nutrient-deficient soil in a simulated Martian environment? And will all of these grow with synthetic additives or plant foods that we have? So here's my hypothesis. I'll just summarize this. So for purple basil, I thought that the one with no additives at all, it would like not grow, and if it did, it would only grow like maybe 1 centimeter. When you add plant food A, which has a bunch of elements, I thought that it might grow 2 centimeters, which is not that different from 1.5, but I feel like the plant food would add some growth to it. And finally, for plant food B, I thought that it would grow 1.75 centimeters because that showed the most growth when I did my research. And then this was the same for purple plum radish and pitaya, which I didn't mention earlier is also dragon fruit. So here's my material list. I had to use citrus potting mix, sand for the nutrient-deficient soil, purple basil seeds, purple plum radish seeds, pitaya seeds, plant food A, plant food B, a gallon of bottled water, clear 18-ounce plastic cups, a 4-foot table, a 4-headed grow light, which was Mars's 12 hours of light, and also a black containers I called them black boxes. They were Mars's 12 hours of darkness. I used sticky tabs to mark all of my plants and what they needed. I used a ruler, measuring cups, a composition notebook, and markers and a styrofoam plant holders. So here's my procedure, which I will also summarize. So to be innovative, I used plastic cups instead of actual pots because I felt like 1, it's just adding me, and 2, just adding me. My bad. And I poked 4 holes in the center bottom, and I added the 1 cup of cactus potting mix, and then I added 1/4 of a cup to the sand to the potting mix, which was my really nutrient deficient soil. It was like trying to make the potting mix more nutrient deficient. And then I mixed this potting mix in the sand, and then I added 3 purple basil seeds, purple plum radish seeds, and pitaya seeds to each one of the 21 cups I used. And then on each one I tapped them to make sure I had the right additives and the right and how much water they were all getting. And then over the course of the 21 days, here are my results. This is for purple basil. The only point of growth was the 2 centimeters in trial 2 at pot A2. And then here are my purple plum radishes, which did fairly well. In the sandy soil, which I think is an outlier, it's trial 2 pot A2. And then for the sandy soil with plant food B was 6.35 centimeters and 2.5 4 centimeters. Those round up to like about an inch or two, which was really good considering the environment it was in. And then for this one, it just had no growth, which was suspected because it doesn't thrive in cold or nutrient deficient soil. So here are my data analysis / findings. Based on the data, it can be deduced that nutrient A did not have much impact. However, nutrient B did. So in further studies, we can use nutrient B and kind of push away nutrient A because we see that it has more effects with growth. And the basil also did have stunted growth, and at the end of the period, it started to show signs of wilting. And then this could be because of the cold temperatures. And on average, the area of the experimental space was 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So yes, that was my twist on Mars's cold environment. And then my data findings was that one mushroom sprouted instead of a plant. How that happened, I have no idea. But it could be one the seeds were mixed up, or it could be something that was in the potting mix. So conclusion. So based on the data collected, the hypothesis for trial 1, which included purple basil, purple plum radishes, and pitaya, was rejected because all of them didn't grow. But if all of them did grow, then it would be it would be accepted. The purple basil grew 2 centimeters with plant food B, and the one with purple plum radish grew 5.8 centimeters. And I had controlled variables. It was the amount of time the amount of time the plants were exposed to lights, the types of plants, the amount of water, and the stimulants used for each trial. I also did have some setbacks. I couldn't actually get Martian soil, so I used nutrient deficient soil. And yeah. Oh, future research. So in the future, I would use more additives, potentially organic ones, and I would also have them be exposed to more time and put them in maybe a freezer so it could actually be colder environments. And then here are my sources, if you care to read them. They're right here, and then additional sources, and yeah, that's it. Any questions?
So you've got to love radishes to be able to live on.
Pretty much. Yes. Oh, sorry.
Well, in The Martian, of course, we focus on the starch. Now, how much starch in the radish? That's for longevity.
Yes. Wait, I'm sorry. Sorry. What was the exact question?
In the science fiction, I know it's science fiction movie, Martian, he was stranded on Mars.
Yes.
So they had to pick him up, but he needed a source so he could survive. Mm-hmm. And they selected potato for starch. That had starch. Okay. So what about you? You were selecting the radish, right?
Yes.
Okay. So how much starch is in the radish versus, let's say,
well, I believe potatoes have more starch, but I'm not too sure. I would have to do further research on that and then get back to you. But that's a great question. Thank you.
Right. But there might be in the radish family maybe something that resembles it.
Thank you.
And you said you could have another year. Right?
Oh, yes.
They do have purple potatoes. I noticed you have one UK article, the 5th reference there, how to grow your own. You might want to go look online and see if there's like something from Aberdeen, Scotland. I was there for a while, several years ago, and it never, I mean, they call a heat wave 67 degrees Fahrenheit in the heat wave, and they've won awards for all of these gardens, beautiful gardens all over the city, and they only have yards that are about the size of this top of this table, and yet they are just thriving with all sorts of vegetables and stuff. And considering how cold it's there all the time, it just goes to show that with enough sun, enough sunlight, and enough water, you can grow stuff inside of a refrigerator, apparently. Because that was my impression of Aberdeen, Scotland while I lived there. It was like living in a refrigerator. So that's getting closer to your goal of growing stuff on Mars. So I would think that something, grow food in Aberdeen or something in Aberdeen, Scotland, there might be a website that tells you, gives you some cool tips, good tips on how to make stuff thrive in an almost impossible temperature situation.
That's a good point.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. It was a wonderful presentation. And then hopefully we'll have time at the end for y'all to come around and y'all could talk about your project and a little bit more on a one-on-one thing. And you wanted to speak a little bit.
So, our earthquake presentation, there's a it was a two-partner project, and her partner's out of town, and she's feeling under the weather. So she's coming back next month to give with the other two presenters. So she'll be our presenters, they'll be our presenters next month, along with the other two that weren't able to make it today.
Oh, okay, great.
And she's feeling under the weather, but it'd be nice if her partner's in China right now. Mm-hmm. So her partner will be able to do the presentation with her next month.
Great.
So that's what we're going to do.
Awesome. And with that, so what we're going to do is give out the awards. Before that, I wanted Richard to come up and talk about the Mars Society and a little bit about the additional award that he's going to be given to our recipients today. So let you come up and talk a little bit about that.
Thank you, sir.
And this should clip on right there.
As many of you may know, there are several space-related organizations that we can all be members of and part of. And some of us are dual or triple affiliated with multiple space organizations. I happen to be involved with the Mars Society and the National Space Society and the Planetary Society. It wasn't by design, but that's where I ended up. So, and Robert is also a member of the Mars Society and attended one of our meetings and said, hey, there might be some room for us to work together on different things. And I thought that was a wonderful idea. And as much as I want to support Robert and the National Space Society and the Houston chapter with things that they're doing, the reciprocal of that offer is also on the table. So the Mars Society, the Houston chapter, has planned an event at the George Observatory to hopefully see the planet Mars and the other astronomical things that are up in the heaven. And that is taking place Saturday, March 29th. So if anybody is interested in going to the George Observatory and looking out the telescopes and having a good time, there's flyers on the table, and feel free to pick one of those up. And I got this from the Mars Society just the other day, and for the students that presented their projects today, the Mars Society is having their 4th high school Ready to Conquer Mars, Mission to Mars is what they're calling it. And it's their 4th annual event, and they're asking students age 13 to 19 to develop. It's all in here, but it's small print. A surface mission lasting up to 18 months, covering key elements such as habitats, vehicles, scientific instruments, power systems, crew composition, mission objectives, and exploration plans. So this might be up y'all's alleys because you're very forward thinking in terms of all the things you get involved in, and you might want to discuss this with your classmates or teachers or whatever that you're affiliated with. I don't know that it has to be done through a school. I think it can be done as individuals. So as part of the award, you're going to be receiving a book signed by the founder of the Mars Society, Dr. Robert Zubrin. And in that book is one of these little brochures about the competition that's available to students 13 to 19. So if anybody's interested in spreading their wings and being involved in more than one society, feel free to reach out. I have a little thing back here that you can click with your camera. It's a QR code that'll take you to our Facebook page or whatever, or just come say hi to me after the meeting. So that's pretty much what I have planned to discuss today, other than participating in the awards, because it's a joint effort in putting together an award package for all the people that have been selected through the National Space Society as winners of their criteria. And one of the other things I passed around, I don't know if everybody got it, a signed sheet to get your email, because the Mars Society wants to offer all of the students that won complimentary membership into the Mars Society for a year. After that, it's up to you if you want to continue, but it's a whopping $25 a year, and I think you can get 3 years for $50, so it's fairly affordable. That's all I have to say.
Well, Richard, I'd like to keep you up here. And we can have each of the presenters come up by their boards, and what we'll have, Richard, just have you give them each their signed copy of the book.
And there's 2 books, actually. You don't get both of them, but I'll give you a choice.
Yeah, just go ahead and stand by your posters.
There's a book called The Case for Nukes, which is not bombs. It's nuclear propulsion and nuclear power systems and their place in space. And then the other one is The Case for Mars, just about why go to Mars, why go now, and that sort of thing. So there's other things that we have for you besides this, but this is what the Planetary Society, the Mars Society has for y'all. I thought, who was doing the rocket engines?
I would love Case for Nukes, because that's my
I think I had you picked out for that. The Case for Mars, I think, would be for you. Quantum Horizons, let's see. Nuclear. And there you go. Thank you. Good job, y'all.
Can we get a picture of you with the
absolutely.
You ready? And then, Robert, can we go ahead and Robert, can we go ahead and give them the okay. Then we have one more plaque, and it also comes with a rocket. This one is one of it's not the one that we'll keep them in their box for that. 1144.
I don't need this anymore.
Where's your sign-in sheet? What's your sign-in sheet?
And the reason for platform on this is
Yeah, I do. I don't know where to plant. So much for coming up. I like this idea. My father has Parkinson's disease, so I'm going to see if I can arrange for me to be there.
Okay.
But I'm 30% right now, based on family news.
This is what it's like after you run those all Friday. There we go. You know, that way. I mean, it's a little bigger, but you know, it's a good warm up, maybe. And I think at this point we'll go ahead and end the meeting here, and then we'll have everybody wander around and talk to the people that presented and find out more. And then you're also welcome to come meet us at PJ's down the street down here. And I'd like to take a group picture real quick. I guess I'm really I don't like this. Whatever, Ron, for a camera. And if we could, there's a super cool. I've been missing a couple of meetings. There's just you. I had a butt. So okay. If I could get everybody out here real quick for a group picture, that would be great. Maybe we get a lineup. Yeah, that'd be cool. The moms are Nathan. So they're going to be standing here or standing up here? Everybody up? Everybody. Would you mind giving one of my cameras? My name is Everybody. Okay. All of them too. Everybody. Can you use your cameraman voice to get them in the right place? We got a couple of stragglers back there. Oh, yep. Let's squeeze over. Come on, Ace. We're friends. I showered you. You need a wide angle on there. You're behind the chair. There you go. That makes two of us. Oh, you should come up here.
Oh, listen, I was just my door.
No. Moms are going to make it happen. You guys ready? Yeah. A little more. We should get you here too. Oh, yeah. Come on. Yes, most definitely. Come on. Any place. Up here.
Obviously, the tall people on the back.
Any place. You guys ready? Oh, my. Yeah, just one more for my camera, so I can post it on the website. We do have people come. Guys ready? Yep. Thank you so much. Thank you all so much.
Okay, so what did I do with this? Okay. Do you have any? Okay. So, Dr. Tanya
Oh, it's your house.
And we're trying to work with him. I want to do it back. And I want to come here his side. But I'm going to take the rest of the day.
At gmail.com. Okay.
I do.
I'm sure that we originally talked about it. Just didn't strike the first and the third. Okay. So what? Tell me what. So now we get out.
As long as you know, as long as I say algebra 1, you can do orbital intercepts. And the switches in the puzzle, you can put in the circle on L5, L9, whatever, that one has to get there. Right. And this is the school image.
We